Okay, welcome to the Parsha class, Parshat Chayei Sara 5785. It is a little later than we usually do it, but scheduling conflict being as it is, it's the earliest time I had. I apologize. But it was still a lot of great information, a lot of great ideas and important concepts and stories in the Parsha. And I'd like to share as much as I can with you tonight. We'll try to, um, as much as we can. There's basically three stories in the parsha, three sections as it is, and we'll try to at least have some information on all three for your listening pleasure, and maybe you'll have something to share at the Shabbat table, or for your own benefit. As Here we go. Uh, as it happens. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we have quite a bit to say today. Let's start with um, the beginning of the parsha. It's called Chayei Sara because it is the parsha that deals with the death of Sara Imenu, our matriarch. And as soon as she dies, we've dealt before in previous years about the strange way that the parsha begins by listing off her years. Strongly recommend going to our YouTube channel to look at previous classes of Chayei Sara for that. But the very next verse says, "V'tamat Sara b'Kiryat Arba." He Chevron. Sara died in Kiryat Arba, which is also Chevron. Be'eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan. V'yavo Avraham lispod l'Sara v'livko ta. He came to eulogize Sarah and to cry over her. Now, there's a lot to say about the fact that there's a small chaf or kaf in livchota, and the fact that he cried for her. It's diminished. It's so he cried less than maybe he was going to, or less than he ought to have, or however you want to understand it. There's quite a bit of commentary on that, but he lispod l'sar. He gave a hesped. He gave a eulogy, and eulogies are an important facet of Jewish life. It is part of the Jewish life cycle. It is the end. During the funeral, there are eulogies, and it's not a small deal. The Gemara in the Dharm that we have here, Pei Gimel Amud Bet 83b, says that we learn a lesson here. Uh, it says Tanya, if the second line there, V'haya Rabbi Meir Omer, my diktiv chava yitain al libo the yispod lay. If somebody yispodun lay, if somebody gives a eulogy, then he's going to be eulogized. V'yivkun lay, and then if somebody cries, then they'll be cried about. V'yikbar yikbarun lay. So if he buries somebody, he himself will be buried. In other words, there's always it's an important mitzvah. Aside from everything else, it continues. There's a chain of other people doing this for others. Obviously, you can't bury yourself, so therefore somebody has to do it for you, and then that person will also be buried when after 120 years after his or her time comes. So we've got this great idea of you should give eulogies. Eulogies are important. There's halachot about how to give eulogies. You're not supposed to go overboard. You can't exaggerate how great the person was, etc. So there's probably other lessons as well. You'd have to see the Jewish life cycles class for that. But there's an interesting halachic question, and that is what happens. This kind of goes right to the heart of what a eulogy is about. For whom is a eulogy? Who benefits from it? Does the dead person need people to hear how great of a person they were, or what's going on? So there's actually a machloket amongst the poskim, amongst the Rishonim and Achronim, what exactly the benefit of a eulogy is. Some people say that the eulogy is for the benefit of the deceased. A person died, so other people should know what for that person's honor. We all, I mean, we all strive for honor one way or the other. And one way that we're honored is people remember the good things that we've done. That's one thing. And there's another opinion, equally valid, that the benefit is for the benefit of the family of the deceased, that they should be comforted, that somebody remembered them. So then the question becomes, what's the difference? Is there a nafka mina, as they say? Is there a practical ramification if one opinion over the other? And the answer is yes. There's one major difference. There's one situation where it makes a big difference for whom the eulogy is being given. And that is a situation where the person has asked before death not to be eulogized, as has happened in the case of several famous great rabbis and other people who are humble. The story goes that Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer, Rabbi Yitzchak Peterberger, one of the students of the Vilna Gaon, so he passed away, he died, and he asked that nobody should eulogize him, and his student Rav Chaim Berlin eulogized him. He was asked, the Rav said not to, the Rebbe said not to. So Rav Chaim Berlin used our verse to explain the difference. Our verse, what does Avraham do? Avraham does two things. On the one hand, he, as we said, lispod l'Sara, he eulogized her, and also livkota, he cried over her. Says Rav Chaim Berlin, that's actually what we're talking about here. When somebody asks not to be eulogized, so okay, I will honor that. I won't eulogize the person, but to not cry, nobody can tell me not to cry. In other words, I have emotions, I have feelings, I have regesh. So now this person passed away. Now I have to express myself somehow. So I'm not doing it for their benefit. I'm not doing it to eulogize them for them. I'm doing it because I need to cry, and that's a whole different concept. Nobody can stop us from the concept of being of crying over somebody. Happens to be that the Gemara Nedarim says both of those ideas, right? The yivkun lay. So if somebody cries and they're cried for, it seems to be a separate thing than a hefsed, than a eulogy. And again, perhaps the crying is for ourselves, whereas the eulogy might be for that person, and that person can maybe stop us from giving eulogy if that's something that they want to do. But nobody can restrain somebody from being who they are in terms of their emotions. All right, we're going to spend quite a bit of time on another seemingly extra phrase in the parsha, and it's not far away. It's 2 verses later, chapter 23, verse 4, where Avraham introduces himself in his speech, or perhaps in his eulogy already, in his introduction to the people of Chet, the people of this place, the who own the land. So he wants to buy that land to Marta Machpelah, which he bought eventually in all full legal standards. He bought the land in every single possible way. If you see the Orach Chaim, it goes into great detail. Any possible argument is any possible challenge to the purchase of the land can be thwarted with the details in the parsha. But in his introduction to these people, before he even buys the land, what does Avraham say? He says, "Ger v'toshav anochi imachem." I am a stranger and a resident amongst you. Tnu li achuzat kever, give me a piece of burial property, machem, from you. Vekbara meiti milfanai, and I will be able to bury my dead before you. The problem in this verse is the first two words, because they are an oxymoron. They are self-contradictory. You cannot be a ger and a toshav. What ger means is, for without getting too political, a ger is an immigrant, is somebody who doesn't feel like they belong. A toshav is a resident, is just to really make it again, not to get political, but it's a citizen, right? It's somebody who really belongs, somebody who is whose nationality is attached to that land. Ger v'toshav does not make sense. I'm an immigrant and a citizen. This is before naturalization, before the possibility of naturalization, right? I'm a born American and I'm an immigrant. Say illegal immigrant while you're at it, and you'll see how self-contradictory those terms are, right? So which are you, and why does he say both of these things? Now, the way Sefaria translates it, and it's for the ease, to make it easier on our eyes, I guess, more than anything else, it says, I am a resident alien. So like I'm a naturalized alien, a naturalized citizen. So that's not it's not exactly how everybody else understands it. And let's look at some of the commentaries. Let's look at some of the classics today. We'll look at Rashi. We'll look at Ramban, Sforno, and or Chaim. We'll see that there's quite a bit to say about this, and then we'll conclude this particular section, the beautiful Chatam Sofer. All right, so let's get right into it. Rashi, 1,000 years ago, wrote, Ger v'toshav anochi imachem, ger be'eretz acheret, v'nit yashavti imachem. I am a person from another country. I'm an immigrant, and I want to live amongst you. Right? I'm settling. I basically, like the way this is pretty close to how Safari translated it. I'm ready to become a naturalized citizen. I'm ready to live among you. Says the Ramban. He wants us to know, first of all, in case we didn't already, and not all of us know the customs of these places. Haya minhag liyot lahem bate kavarot ish leved avotav. The custom was, when you would bury somebody, you'd bury them in your own private family plot. And what's Avraham saying here? Sara kavura echad yikberu bo kol hagerim. And here there's going to be one big cemetery that you're going to bury all the strangers. Avraham Amar el bnei Chet. So what Avraham was saying to the people of Chet was, Ani ger me'eretz acher. I come from a different land. V'lo hanchalti la'avotai beit hakvura be'eretz hazot. I don't have a land. I don't have a plot for my own personal family plot here. V'hine ata ani toshav imachem. Right now I'm living among you. Ki chafatzti l'shevet be'eretz hazot. I want to live in this land forever. And indeed he does. Right? He lives out his days there. But aside from that, he might be intending, we know he had prophecy in last week's Parsha, 2 weeks ago now, the Brit Ben Abitarim, so the covenant of parts, where Avraham was promised that this land would belong to his descendants. So he's not just saying, I will live in this land. My entire people will live in this land. We're all going to settle here. And therefore, Lachain, I want to buy this plot as if I am one of you. I've dedicated, I'm decided to stay here. The Sforno says something very, very similar. So he says, "Bishvil yotu ger ein li po kever." Because I am a ger, because I'm not from here, therefore I don't have a place here. I don't have a place here for my burial plot. Amru, as it says, and he quotes here a pasuk in Yeshayahu, uh, right? Umilecha po ki chafatzto lecha po kever. So, so in other words, if you're from a different place, who's going to have a kever? Therefore, who's gonna be waiting around with the land for you to bury yourself in, right? From a different country that you're coming from, right? That doesn't make any sense. Um, and so he says. והטעם שאני מבקש לקנותו הוא מפני שאני תושב עמכם, שבאתי והשתקע לו לגור בלבד. So I'm ready to buy this land because I want to I want to live with you, and I want to become and a little more than that. I want to become right. I want to be one of you in a sense, and not obviously one of your people, but I want this land. This land is my land, right? I want this land to belong to me 100%. Says the Or HaChaim. Um, Tam Tanato Gervatoshav. So the reason he calls himself is says is al pi mashikatav Rambam peragimad behilchot zichiu matana zelishon. So he quotes the Rambam in the laws of acquisitions, chapter 3, where it says Yachol yitain matnas chinam leger tochav shata mitzuva lehachayoto. So you're not allowed to give land for free to somebody who is an Oved Avodah Zarah, somebody who worships idols. But a Ger Toshav, the Rambam's definition of a Ger Toshav, is not just somebody who wants to live in the land, but somebody who has promised to keep the 7 mitzvot of Bnei Noach. So such a person can be gifted the land. Um, because we have a responsibility. So he says, "Shata mitzuva lahachayoto." You have a responsibility to help him survive, right? The Ktiv, as it says in the pasuk in Vayikra, "Gevetosha v'chai imach." You have to make sure that he's able to live amongst you, this convert and this ger toshav. Ad kan, that's a quote from the Rambam. V'yesh l'cha l'dat ki kol toratenu hakdosha he sichlit. Everything in the Torah has to make sense. It's all logical. Bifrat anyane v'anhaga ha'artzit, and especially when it comes to how we deal with each other, our interpersonal relationships. Ukamo sha'anu mitnahagim bagev hayoshev imachem. So that's why the Torah wants us to be nice to this ger toshav, this visitor, right? Who's living among us. Kamo kain itchayo sichliut yoshvei haaretz lahanhig beinehem. And then the people of the world are going to use their senses, right? Be smart about life, right? How lahachayot adam shehu ger v'toshav imahem lo matnat chinam, and they're going to realize that they should be giving him gifts if that's what it takes to help him live. V'hi tanat Avraham ger v'toshav anochi tanu li. So that's why he's saying, I am a stranger and a resident among you. In other words, you want me to survive. You want me. You want to do the kind of chesed that such people deserve. People like me, people who are from out of town, right? People from different lands. Vutan Avram give to Shavanochi. He says this. V'dik de glomar ger. And from the fact that he said ger, lo, he speak lomar toshav. He didn't have to mention that he's living amongst them. It's obvious. Bekuva and lomar is what. So what he was trying to say is shahagam shani ger ve'ini mikem af abi kain harinu toshav. Even though I'm a stranger, and even though I don't belong to your nation, but I'm still somebody who's living here. You need to treat me nicely. Oh, Tam Amru Ger. Another reason he said that he's a ger, that he's a stranger, is Ki Chash Lomar Al Atzmo Tosha B'Olam Hazeh. He's trying to. He didn't want to consider himself a toshav, somebody who lives in this world, and who lives permanently in this world. He's just traveling through. Who chefach midat hatzadikim. That's not how tzadikim view themselves. Hikdim lomar ger. That's why he called himself a ger. Now, on that topic, on that same idea, comes along the Chatam Sofer and says a beautiful thing. Well, I thought I had it here. Awkward. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Let's do that. Okay. Yeah. We'll get that onto the sheet later. Geret Toshav Anochi Machem Perush Ki Hem Hakbidu L'Kvor Ish Nachri B'Kvoram Mashakatav Ramban. So he explains this like the Ramban. Who P'tuya L'Kol Zman Sha Adam Chai Al Pi Hadama Rehu Ger Gam Eretz Muladato. Ukishem Adam Arehu Tosha B'Chol Makom. So, in other words, we are in this world. We are impermanently here. We are gerim. We have traveled through. We're not from here. We're from a different place. We're from another world, right? Not another planet. We're from We're from the spiritual world. Our souls belong somewhere else. So we have to live here 120 years, whatever it is. So we're here impermanently. We're here temporarily. Like the famous story about the Chavetz Chaim, that he was asked by a reporter who was visiting him. He heard his famous rabbi. It was in Radin, right? So he came to visit the Chavetz Chaim, and he's interviewing him. And the reporter asked, it's bare. You didn't have pictures on the wall. You didn't have books on the shelves. He had just like a chair and a table, and that's about it. So he asked the Chavetz Chaim, like, how do you live like this? Where's the rest of your stuff? So the Chavetz Chaim asked the reporter, where's your stuff? Says the reporter says, I'm visiting here. I live whatever in Paris, whatever. My stuff's in the apartment over there. So the Chavetz Chaim said, me too. I'm also visiting here. This is temporary. All my real stuff, my real possessions, they're all packed away and ready for me. They're unpacked, I should say, right? And they're waiting for me in the Olam HaEmet, in the true world. On that same subject, wow, why not? Right, on that same subject. Let's get to chapter 24, verse 1, and get into the beginning of the next story. The next story is where Avraham commands Eliezer, his servant, to find a wife for his son Yitzchak. And that verse, those verses begin with this one line: Avraham Zakein Ba Bayamim. Avraham became old. Hashem beirach et Avraham bakol, and Hashem blessed Avraham with everything. Bakol. We've said in previous years, the Gemara, Bava Kama, I believe it is, says that that the Bakol is also the name of Abraham's daughter. He had a daughter. That's what it means. He was blessed. He's blessed with a girl, and we talked about that. We talked about Rav Chaim Kanievsky's commentary about that. But Bakol, oh, there's the Chatam. There's the Chatam Sofer. I knew he was somewhere. That guy gets around. So, very nice. So Rav Samson Rafrol Hirsch brings from the Midrash. I take that back from the Gemara. The call also means something else. Baruch et Avraham Bakol. Our sages correlate with this verse the words of Yitzchak, V'achol Mikol. Later on, Yitzchak is going to say, I ate from everything. And the words of Yaakov, Yeshli Kol, I have everything. We have Avraham was blessed with everything, Yitzchak ate from everything, and Yaakov had everything. Seeing in the three terms, Kol, Bakol, Mikol, Kol, as we say, by the way, in Birkat HaMazon, in reference to this, the quintessence of the lives of the patriarchs, our sages say, Losha Hatu'umin HaKadosh Baruch Hu Me'en Olam Haba Elu Hein Avraham Yitzchak V'Yakov Diktiv V'Hu Bakol Mikol Kol. They had everything in the world that they but they lived in this world as if it was the world to come. Says Rav Hirsch, an explanation. The three patriarchs fared differently in their external situations. Abraham's whole life was a continuous ascent, culminating in his being honored as Nasi Elokim, right, the priest of Hashem among the nations, right? By contrast, Yaakov, with but his staff in his hand, was forced to flee his native land to slave away from a deceitful uncle. Yitzchak occupied a middle position. In his home, one could already see the beginnings of the end of good fortune. Despite this difference between the patriarchs, God nevertheless gave all three a foretaste of the next world while they were still in this world. For all three attains God's blessing, Bakol Mikol Kol. He continues, if we understand these words of our sages correctly, their meaning is as follows. Avraham's happiness came to expression in that he was blessed bakol in everything. A person may succeed in everything that he does, everything that he owns may prosper, and yet he himself may remain unhappy amidst all this blessing. All his assets grow and thrive, but in his heart there is no simcha. He does not grow or flourish spiritually. Avraham, however, did feel himself blessed and flourished through all his blessings. It had nothing to do with the things he had. It's how he felt about what he had. The expression used by Yitzchak, "V'ochel mikol," is weaker. It corresponds to the phrase, "Be'emek habacha mayan yishtuhu." So from Tehillim 84:7, the righteous transform their tears into a source of blessing. Shomer mitzvah lo yeda davar ra, says Kohelet 8:5. One who views his whole life from the perspective of mitzvah, duty, will not know any evil thing. Right? Shomer mitzvah lo yada davar ra. Times of trouble too bring him duties, right? Responsibilities. By doing his duty in time of distress, he finds happiness at all times. V'ochel mikol. He draws sustenance from everything. The highest level, which nevertheless can be attained by anyone in any situation, is the level of Yitzchak. Yesh li kol. He never lacks anything, because he wants not to take, but to give and to do. Even in the most depressing of circumstances, such as those experienced by Yaakov, one finds supreme satisfaction in life. Right? So that's what it means to have kol, to have everything. it doesn't mean that you have literally all the most recent gadgets, most updated phones, the fanciest cars, the most beautiful home. That's not what it means. To have everything means you have what you need to help, and you know that it's for the purpose of getting your job done. You have a job in front of Hashem and for the sake of the world, and that's what you're here for. And as long as you have that perspective, you'll be able to get through. All right, then he goes on to talk about the idea of in Baba Batra of Bakol being Avram's daughter. He talks a little bit about that, but that's not for us today. All right, let's skip ahead into one whole verse later, chapter 24, verse 2, 3, and 4. 3 verses. And this is where Avraham has Eliezer swear to do this job. Avraham alavdo zaken beito hamoshe b'chol shelo simna yarcha tachet yerechi. He has his servant who's not named, by the way. Right? We know him as Eliezer from the midrashim, etc., from the Gemaras, but the text itself does not call him Eliezer; just says servant. And he has him swear by putting his hand on his thigh. Swear in front of the God of the heavens, the God of earth, that you're not going to take a daughter for my son from the daughters of the Canaanim, that I'm living amongst. That's not who I want my son to marry. I want my son to marry somebody else. Who does he want him to marry? Ki el artzi vel moladeti tele. Go to my land and where I'm from. Lakachta isha libni Yitzchak, and there you're going to find a wife for my son. In Lev Eliyahu, Rav Eliyahu Lopian writes a very famous piece. Probably should blow it up a little bit so we can see what we're reading today. Not too big, not too small, just right. There we go. Excuse me. From the second paragraph. Why does it have to call Eliezer the master of everything that's in Avram's house? Torah Hakadosha melamedet lanu she'af al pi she'Eliezer avdo haya Moshe b'chol asher lo, even though he had so much responsibility and he was in charge of Abraham's passwords and Abraham's keys and Abraham's bank accounts and social security. Even though he knew all of that, nevertheless, Afal P, even nevertheless, Aval Kishava Lishilcho Lehesi Ishal Yitzchak Beno. He made him swear about finding a wife for his son. Why? Lo Samach Emunato Alav. He didn't want to rely on his faith of him. V'lo al Yerushato Yitzidkato. Not on his greatness, and not on his straightforwardness, not on his righteousness. Ela ad yishava lo shvua de araita. He made him to swear. All right, b'nikiyat chafetz simnat yarcha tachet yirechi. Right, it makes him swear like this. Kasuk lama. Why does it say so much about how much he's swearing? Have omer ki lehasi isha livno Yitzchak lehakim et Beit Yisrael, to find a wife for his son Yitzchak, who is going to be the next forefather of the Jewish people. Harei chachmat nashim benata beta ve'ulat biyada teharsa, as it says in Mishlei. As it says in Mishlei 14:1, right? that the wise among women each builds her house. In other words, a woman builds the house. It's not a small thing. We're not just looking for, oh, yeah, I want you to go find a pet for my son, or I want you to go find him a nice vacation spot, or we're not sending Eliezer to do some unimportant menial task. We're sending him to find one of the foremothers of the Jewish people. It's not something you could just let him do on his own. He has to swear. He has to understand the seriousness of his mission. You know, it's really it's really very enlightening, because people very often they have strange concepts of what of where to trust people, where not to trust people. There's that famous story about Rav Yisrael Salanter, that he came to an inn once. He traveled a lot, collecting money, etc., selling books, and he came into an inn, and the innkeeper said, "Oh, you look like a very of important person. We can't find a shochet, and we need somebody to shecht some meat for us. Would you shecht the meat for us?" So Yisrael Salanter said, "I'm sorry, it's not something I know how to do." Time passes, and I think the next day, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter comes down to the innkeeper, and he says to him, "Can I borrow 1,000 rubles?" The innkeeper says, 1,000 rubles? I don't know you. How do I know you're going to pay me back 1,000 rubles? He says, wait a minute, says Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. You don't trust me to pay you back 1,000 rubles, but when it comes to a kosher slaughter, a kosher shechita of an animal, there I look religious enough. You trust me for that. You trust me for a spirit for this important spiritual job, or for this physical thing of holding on to your money. You're not going to trust me about. Where's your priorities? Where are you going to trust people? Where you're not going to trust people? So Avraham's trust of Eliezer had a beginning and had an end. You know, it had he trusted him only so much, and he trusted him a lot with all of his belongings, all of his stuff. Like I said, but to find a wife for Yitzchak, it's an important job. You need to know what you're getting yourself into, and that's why he has him swear, not because of anything negative, but on the very contrary, because it's a very important job that he's sending him to do. Okay, and so he does it. So the rest of chapter 24 mostly is Eliezer's trip to where Avraham comes from, to Syria, and there he finds Rivka, and Rivka passes a series of tests. We talked about these tests in a previous class, a previous year. And then her father, her brother, her mother all agree that she can go with the man, but then the next morning he comes down and says, "Okay, we're ready to go." And they say to him, "Ve'omer achicha, achiha, ve'imah teshev anara imanu." So the brother and the mother says, "Let her stay with us." By the way, it does not include her father Betuel, because he, according to the Midrash, he died. Yamim o asor achar telech. She should stay with us for days, or the way Rashi understands it, the way the Gemara understands it, is Yamim means for a year, or asor, or 10, meaning 10 months. After that, she'll come with you. In other words, they're delaying. The Gemara says in Ketubot 57b, Ketubot is about the Ketubah document, right? The sort of the document that brings a girl protection from her husband, and gives responsibilities of her husband in writing so that she knows what she's getting into. And the Gemara there says, and we quoted this, I think, last year's word, or 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. It says that it translates this concept of yamim as a year, and these 10 meaning 10 months, and basically that's where the Gemara learns out that certain people do not get a ketubah. Certain people who are too young do not yet get a ketubah when they get married because they're not really fully married yet. The Pnei Yehoshua in his commentary on the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Kra Hule, Keshav Anari Tanu, Vafal Gadol Chora Lo, Higdasha Rivka, Adayim Be'ota Shah. She was not married then. Why wasn't she married? For two reasons. One is the Ein HaEved Nasa Shliach Ledat HaOmrim Adayin Lo Nitcharer Eliezer. So Eliezer, being Avraham's servant, did not have the ability to be the shliach to marry Rivka to Yitzchak. He didn't have that ability. He was still a slave. Slaves don't have that ability. That's one thing. And then also, v'od l'shitat hatosfot v'yivamot dav samach aleph in Yivamot 61. Tosfot right. Rivka bat Yudalad Shana Haita. She was 14 years old, and a 14-year-old girl has a whole different concept in halacha. She's a Bulgarian, etc. So she does not have the same responsibilities to have a ketubah, and that's another reason why she did not have a ketubah, and why she had to make a decision right then and there whether or not she wanted to follow along with Eliezer. Okay, one last thing, and we'll call it a night. And this is from the end of the parsha, very, very end of the parsha. Avraham dies, and v'yigbaru oto Yitzchak v'Yishmael. Yitzchak and Yishmael buried him. Banav, his sons, El Marat HaMachpelah, right there in Marat HaMachpelah, as we've had before, the same place that Avraham bought for Sara. El Sadeh Ephron, his field of Ephron ben Tzochar, Aichiti, Asher Al Pnei Mamre, same place. And that's where he's buried. On the words, Yitzchak v'Yishmael, Yitzchak and Yishmael buried him. Rashi, and perhaps this is because the order seems strange, because Yishmael is the older brother, so Yishmael should have been mentioned first, right? So Rashi comments, Yitzchak v'Yishmael, Mekan she'asa Yishmael teshuva. Rashi says, and not everybody agrees, but let's go with it for a moment, that Yishmael did teshuva, v'holich et Yitzchak lefanav, and that's why he let Yitzchak go in front of him, because he became a humble person. He realized he did teshuva. He realized that indeed Yitzchak was the sole responsible heir to the future of the Jewish people, and Yishmael is recognizing that it's part of the tshuva. Remember, tshuva has to do something to do with the reason for the justification for the sin to begin with. Why did Yishmael sin? What was his sin? He played around with Yitzchak. He basically, according to Chazal, he tried to kill him because he didn't want Yitzchak to get the Yerusha, the inheritance. So here, doing tshuva, part of doing tshuva here includes understanding that Yitzchak deserved the inheritance. Now, this is a very important halachic concept because you might have noticed in Jewish history there have been great people named Yishmael. There's a Kohen Gadol named Yishmael. There's a famous rabbi named Rabbi Yishmael, whom we quote from the Gemara, who the basic concept of how to interpret Torah law from the verses comes from this Rabbi Yishmael that we say every morning in Shacharit, some of us anyway. And so it seems like Yishmael is a name that we use. The problem is we're not supposed to use a person's name if the person is a bad person. We're not supposed to use a name like, I don't know, Nimrod or Achashverosh or Haman. We're not supposed to name our children like that. So how did Rabbi Yishmael's father name him Rabbi Yishmael? If did he not know that? And the answer is this Rashi, this concept that he did tshuva, and if he did tshuva, he was a great man. Yishmael was great. This has nothing to do with what his ancestors might be doing now or whatever. Yishmael himself was a great person. He did tshuva, and it was a proper tshuva, and he even allowed Yitzchak the rights to be ahead of him in the funeral procession of their father Avraham. And again, tshuva is a powerful thing. We can't negate that. We can't take anything away from that. Tshuva is the thing that allows us to accept people. Avraham himself was somebody who was a Baal Tshuva. He was raised as an idolater. Okay, fine, a young age, but still, at some point in his life, he turned things around, and that's one of the things, according to I believe I saw this or heard this in the name of Rav Twersky. That's one of the things that made Avraham so successful in outreach. He had thousands and thousands of converts. How did he do that? One of the reasons is because he was there. He's been there. He wasn't so distant from everybody else. In other words, Yitzchak's parents are Avraham and Sara. So Yitzchak comes over to you and says, you should really keep mitzvos. Easy for you to say, Yitzchak. You barely have a choice in the matter. Avraham had a choice. Avraham was there. He knows both sides. He knows what he's leaving behind by becoming a monotheist, and especially now that we're learning about Avraham's death, it's important to stop and think what a great man he was. Right? He was an upstanding person. He was very kind and caring. He last week's parsha, he prayed for people who didn't deserve it, and he was sad when they died. And this all goes to show what a great person Avram was, and how much we need to live up to the ideals that he set for the Jewish people. I thank you for your time. Sorry for the late hour again, but especially if you're watching this later on YouTube, right, at your own convenience, maybe while you're cooking for Shabbat or whatever. In which case, I hope the food's good. Hope it turns out. Either way, I hope you have a good rest of your week and a Shabbat Shalom.